Hello Internet, I'm Jackie Fox. Today we're going to be going through every dark unit in the game so far. And of course we're going to be starting with Sephiroth, the man who needs no introduction, therefore I'm not going to give him one. I'm also not really going to talk about him much, because if you have him, you have him. You know he's good, you know what he does. If you don't have him, he's probably not coming back anytime soon, so he's probably the least relevant unit for me to talk about in this video. Sorry for everybody who got clickbaited by the thumbnail. You should have known this was going to happen. Shadowlinks on Ice is a piercing unit, high accuracy, high range. A lot like a Trick Lancer is kind of my memory of her. She has a dark break on her LB, which is quite effective, especially good in PvE. Looks like she's got some good critical. Little extra movement, extra attack. Oh, Violet Shadow, I like that. That's good. More agility, defense penetration. Looks like she gets pretty decent AoE resistance, good jump, good buffs, good attacks. Just kind of a good all-around like 90 cost unit. She's part of our global first units because we voted for Shadowlinks. We wanted a UR Shadowlinks, and that's what we got. I think we expected her to be a light unit, but that was not what we got. We got another Dark Shadowlinks. Halloween Lucia is the girl who turns people into frogs. Also notable for having a Blade Soul-esque 7,500 point health barrier, which is pretty effective for her. She also likes to blast people with Arcane Shot, which is a follow-up attack, non-elemental. And also has some gimmicks based around, I think, gaining CT back when getting kills on a large AoE, very similar to the way the lightning skills work. Dark Fina can re-raise herself. She is a caster, and she is largely a single target unit. Her basic skill lowers single target resistance, which is a pretty great debuff for her, but honestly, usually she just kills people with Comet. Her attack stat is so stacked. I think it's the most stacked magic stat in the game, and at least in terms of base. So any percentage modifiers on her are going to be especially effective for magic. Her magic stat gets ridiculously high. The downside here, though, is that she has casting times on almost literally everything in her kit. The re-raise is helpful, and especially into the future as big AoE resistance builds are going to become more and more common. Like, we recently saw a video come out about Rain with 105 AoE resistance. Well, Dark Fina would just melt him with a comet. So she's particularly interesting moving into the future. Rennell is a free unit. She is an operative, so she's going to be like Valentine's Ildira. She has a lot of the same stuff as that. She's going to be a semi-evasive unit. She can get fairly evasive. She's going to have skills that can inflict blind, skills that have chaining, and pretty good buffs and debuffs. She has the ability to kind of control tempo pretty well. She makes a really good partner for Select Quest with Shadowlinks. Huge synergies between the two of them. Let's see. Little Leela the Bold. So this is the big bad riding Leela. She's a dagger unit, and she is gonna be able to give herself courage, and also she has a threshold heal. Those two things work really well together. She's not necessarily a tank, though. She can generate hate for herself. You can use her as a bit of a pseudo tank, but even with everything that I've said, which makes her sound very tanky, she just isn't super reliable in that respect. I'm not saying that she can't do it, and against some parties she wouldn't do a good job of it. And I'm not saying that she's not annoying to kill, but some of that changes when you get the team to actually focus on her, because some of those gimmicks, you know, they start to wear off once you start taking hits. But she is also a unit that's pretty capable of doing a lot of damage back, and fairly high accuracy damage at that. Joker is also pretty accurate himself. He's a dagger unit that also uses a lot of missile attacks as well. So he's kind of flexible, similar to like lightning and cloud in terms of damage types. Also a unit that can give AoE protect, which is a pretty good opening buff for him, especially back in the day. Like, we're looking at these by release date. So he came out in between Golbez and Little Leela the Bold, both really great defensive units. I don't think either of them necessarily has protect in their kit. So you run these three guys together and they are a defensive wall. But so he's a really good support for that. He also does pretty good damage himself and has some good supportive buffing and debuffing capabilities. It's probably best to think of Golbez as being like a special scholar in that he is a very much a defensively oriented damage mage. He has really strong breaks. In fact, he kind of reminds me of Black Robe Helena in some ways, although ultimately not as good, I would say. She's the classic broken strong dark unit for a reason, even if she doesn't hold up as much. I should probably stop talking about Helena. We're talking about Golbez. Golbez even does have Scholar as a sub job. In the main job, you're also one of the more interesting things that he could do, and he was, I want to say, one of the first units that could do this other than... Actually, I don't remember exactly when Astrius came out. I think he might have been able to do this before Astrius, but he has a buff that he can apply on himself that allows him to absorb HP. So that gives him the potential to be a pretty decent brawler, at least against physical teams, because he can restore his HP pretty reliably and tank through some hits. Also, while breaking and doing consistently more and more damage, and also breaking in AoE, which kind of helps the team. Prompto is an interesting unit. He's one of the only dark gunners, a good dark ranged unit that is very much interested in being a gunner. I believe he's also a sniper sub, so he's got some of that ranger skill. Sometimes rangers have better range in certain ways than gunners, which tend to be very flat in the ways that they can shoot. He's interesting though because he's kind of a combo unit in that some of his bigger damage moves take advantage of or do additional damage because of some of the debuffs that he applies, and he has a lot of debuffs and statuses, including like poison that he can apply, and including being able to break dark at a distance. So he can be a useful unit, but it's, I don't know. He's not bad, and situationally, if a gunner is good on the map, he can be good, but he is a kind of an awkward unit for dark. Lemure is the dark selection quest unit, therefore he's free. He's also one of the easiest of these units to get, just because Shadowlinks, especially now with Rennell, if you have Gaffgarian too, those three just rip selection quest wide open. That being said, he's just not a good unit. I'm not even going to dignify him with a response necessarily. You might build him up and get through selection quest. I mean, you want to get through selection quest for the awakening materials in any element, really, and especially in dark, because it's the easiest if you can build up Shadowlinks. But I would say that probably his redeeming grace is that he has a pretty good TMR. It's, I want to say my favorite TMR fist in that it has a good, like, I want to say 20 passive accuracy and decent attack to build from. So it's good for if you want an accurate fist unit, but also you want to free up some of those other slots by using a TMR weapon. Other than that, not super special. Lemure is kind of a strange unit in that she is an 80 cost regular pool UR unit that does not have a limit break. She is a main job time mage that has haste ja, which her AI still doesn't quite know how to handle, but it can in theory hit multiple units with haste at a time, which is, in my mind, a pretty big improvement over like single target haste moves. But maybe more importantly, she has quicken. And if you have Quicken, that's one of those things that's just always good, even if it's not on the best unit. It can make a otherwise subpar unit good. And she's definitely a good case of that. She's a very effective unit if used strategically. She's also notable for being really like the only support AI'd, or potentially support AI'd healing unit in the Dark Element that I can think of. There are other Dark units that have access to heals, but not ones that will regularly use them, so she's important for filling that niche. And she's also a scholar, so she can potentially make herself more defensive. But unless you turn the offensive skills in that sub-job on, this will really change her AI to make her far more aggressive. And at that point, she's ultimately doing the thing that she is least suited to do. She wants to be a healer, but she definitely wants to be a support. She can do damage in, say, like a PvE, especially from range with the Vitalizing Glint. But like, if that's what you're using her for in PvP, you have missed the point of this unit. Black Witch Helena was like the OG, this unit is fucking broken, how do we counter her unit? Really, the answer to how do we counter her, and how do you counter her even then, was take her out before she can take you out. The thing is, when she was initially introduced, compared to the other units in the game, that was a very tall order, because getting in range of her was scary, and that's quite a range. But the difference now is that it's a lot easier to take her out quickly, and a bit easier to tank through her, though still not super easy for all teams. She is still quite a powerhouse that has a number of breaks that are beneficial for her party, and can help in PvE type stuff as breaks, although she has a little bit of trouble finding chaining partners for that, in that like magic attacks don't chain. And in PvE, especially like manual PvE, if you're having trouble, she does have Arithmetician, so she can absolutely carpet bomb, and that is one of the most flexible sub-jobs for being able to attack things that are different heights than you. So being able to fire up or down, it's really like probably second only to Rangers in that respect, but it usually has a better AoE than Rangers, and also fires up better than Rangers. Rangers are better at firing down. But this also gives her access to instant cast very large AoE heals. The thing is, her AI is so aggressive that it will never use them. Well, I mean, not never, but almost never. You should not rely on it. You should switch to manual to use her heals if you feel you need to, is what I'm saying, because her AI just ain't gonna do it. Garvel is our first energist. He is I think he's 80 cost. Well, I should check. He was either one of the first 90 costs or one of the last 80 costs. One of the last 80 costs. So energists, one big part of energist, I should actually show you as passives to kind of get this across. Hyper vitality. Energists can be especially powerful in PvP, because PvP tends to be shorter, and they've got this 5-turn just roided out state that they can go into. I mean, these are really impactful buffs. It's also a real detriment to them that they basically lose an entire passive after 5 turns. So while I could explain a lot about Garvel that would help you understand him, probably one of the most important parts is that you want to get it done fast with Garvel. He does have the potential for guaranteed hit. He does have magic missile attacks. All of those things are cool, and he can do some pretty impressive damage. But again, he's not made for a long drug out fight. Duane at this point has pretty Swiss Army knife levels of tank busting capabilities, all sorts of breaks. He can deal with pretty much anything. He can also deal quite a bit of damage. Although his ability to deal with courage is locked to a vision card ability that is exclusive to him. Not bad in catching him up, and being in the red mage, I have found some really interesting ways to use this guy. And finally, we all got what we wanted in a recastable form of hate for him. The problem is that even if you build him to be bulky, he's just not a modern tank. He kind of hits this place like Kilfei does, where he can pick up hate, but usually that's a pretty immediate death sentence for him. In that he's just not going to make it through most modern teams, anyone with a good bit of defense penetration. If he does catch somebody without defense penetration, no doubt he could function as a good tank, but, well, that's not very common anymore. That being said, he is pretty accurate and does put out some pretty good damage, so he's certainly not a glass cannon. He's definitely a strong brawler, and he is part of the global first package, just like Shadowlinks on Ice. Titus is an MR paladin. MR tanks are usually pretty good, but Titus is probably my least favorite. I do think the Sword of Urwaz is interesting because as a TMR sword, it is the only sword, or the only weapon that I can think of, but definitely the only sword that can be built for a defensive build that can offer 26 defense, which is pretty wild, and actually what I'm using on my Duane right now. Kane! Who doesn't know Kane and or already know where this is going? Kane is a Dragoon. He is really effective as a DPS and can travel across the map quite effectively thanks to having a lot of jump. So uneven terrain is no problem for this guy. He's also notable for having a TMR that gives him, I want to say, movement up and haste, which is quite good in combination and really, really effective in firing him or other units across the map, assuming that they can use a helm heavy armor. Stern Knight of Ruin was one of the first 100 cost units, let's say like 3rd or 4th, and he's actually aged relatively well. A number of updates have been relatively kind to him. He's not as top tier as he was back in the day, but he is still a very good dark unit to have. He tends to be quite accurate. He has some potential for evasion, but not the most. He also has an automatic one-hit shield that nullifies all damage, which is really effective for keeping him in the game long enough to do catastrophic levels of damage, and also some really crushing debuffs as well. He will brutalize a team if he gets damage, and he can turn a match around pretty effectively because his updates have kept him able to deal really high AoE damage that just leaves survivors in a terrible situation. So as long as he can get in range to get a hit in, he's going to be devastating. But on the other side of that, after that first hit is taken, and if the opponent is relatively accurate, he is very much a glass cannon. If you want a more reliable evasion unit, Venera is the way to go. She's a dagger unit assassin. She's got good, strong debuffs. No, that's Lucia. She has heals that give, like, light killer or something. I don't know. A little niche. Good, I guess, in versus light matchups. I also think that she has the ability to mug, which can be handy in PvE, like in the turtle rooms. Just Venera helps you get extra turtles. Again, she can be pretty dodgy. She's a slash unit, and she moves across the field pretty effectively. She'll make a beeline for people, much like Zazan the Unkillable. Well, any Zazan, really. Whisper is, I would say, more of a resistance tank than anything, even to this day. She can build pretty high resistances across the board, and she finally has good main job hate generation, so she is now an effective tank. She's also a free unit in that you can buy her shards in the shop, so she's not the hardest UR unit to reincarnate a number of times, and tanks tend to really benefit from being reincarnated a lot. But at the same time, she's definitely not the best tank, and we have a really amazing dark tank coming in let's say like 3 months from now. So it's kind of hard to justify the investment in her. But if you don't have other options, you could do worse. It's just like, man, the scrolls. Where are you getting all those scrolls? Gaffgarian is a tactics MR unit. He is free. If we ever get that again, he should be free again. His thing is he's a Dark Knight, so he has a number of skills that he has to sacrifice HP for. He has a number of skills, even more skills, that restore his HP, like Drain Blade type attacks. And his level 80 gimmick is that he gets an additional 25 defense and spirit when his HP is above 70%, which means that you can build him to have really high, like close to 100 defense and spirit, or at least like 75 or so, at least for the first couple of hits. And then he's going to take a lot of damage really fast, which functionally is a bit of a handicap. Although this strategy works really well in PvE, where the average damage per attack is so much lower that he can survive long enough to get a drain in and bring himself back above that threshold so that he's not sitting in the red zone for a long time. Shadowlinks is a really damned evasive MR unit, probably the most evasive MR unit, and also probably more of a damage dealer in general than Rennell, which is a good competition to her. Also, compared to Rennell, she's a little bit more of a single target damage unit. Although I would say that a good bit of Shadowlinks' kit and abilities is a little bit dated compared to the kind of stuff that we're seeing in Operative. That being said, it is always pretty brutal when she just runs up to someone and inflicts stop upon them, which, damn it, I forgot to mention that Katone likes to stop people too. It's a ninja thing, and they're both quite good at it. Stern Leonis is a soldier. That means that he's going to be a Drain Force unit, and especially being an older Drain Force unit, that comes with a lot of the problems that Drain Force units have, in that he has a pretty low HP pool so that Drain Force wouldn't be absurdly broken on him. This, again, like most Drain Force units, gets rectified quite a bit into his reincarnation, but probably not enough to make him a great unit. It will help, and he is notable as being a unit that you can get a 99-cent complimentary 99 Stern, so he's kind of an easy one to start building, but even then, no, not really. Alright, if you saw the last video and you saw me talking about Etra, Zisa is definitely like the UR version of that. She's also a bit more evasive than Etra is. Etra is actually reasonably evasive, which isn't... Damn, why am I thinking of so many Earth things in this video? Especially towards the end. Good grief. But like Etra, she is a monk. She's going to have chakras, so she has the AoE percentage-based heal with regen, and she also has revive, so she can bring people back to life. That's pretty cool. Ryu is the MR gunner unit, so think of him as maybe like an MR Prompto. He also kind of has some backup close range dagger stuff. I want to say he can steal time, that kind of thing. And finally, we have the lowest cost dark unit, Little Leela, who is actually having a bit of a heyday. She was one of the first lower cost units to get her 140, and boy oh boy is she a tough cookie when you reincarnate her enough, because as a tank she picks up a lot of HP, and her silencing spell just breaks a lot of different mage teams. She's really good into mages, and she can be really aggravating with things like full life and some of her heals. Sometimes that can be a bit of a curse. It really depends on how the cookie crumbles, but she has a lot of potential as a white mage, and I always find the synergy between a tank that can keep themselves on the board for quite some time and having the ability to bring people back to life, or just heal in general especially. I always find that to be a really appealing combination, even if it doesn't always work out quite the way I want it to. But she is also notable. I think her magic defense skill lasts for 5 turns, whereas most buffs, or 5 hits, one or the other, where most things only last for 3, so she gets a bit of extra longevity and consistency out of her barrier compared to most units. And with that, I've told you about all of the dark units in the game so far as quickly as I can. Hope you'll tune in for the next one, which is gonna be light. I guess I'll wait until Winged Stern comes out for that one. So, see you then.